Whatever you said, whatever you did, it wasn't just words or actions, it was a seismic shift. The player, once untouchable, a master of his own chaos, now walks with a caution that wasn't there before. His confidence, once unshakable, now carries the weight of consequence. He's not the same man he was. He can't be. You didn't just cross his path, you rewired his reality. Now everyone sees it. The 360-degree change in him, the way he hesitates, the way he looks over his shoulder. They all know it was you, the dark earth angel, the force that doesn't just play the game, but bends it to your will. You didn't just show him who the big boss is. You made sure he'd never forget it. Power is an illusion until it meets something greater. The player had power, raw, unchallenged, untamed. But you had presence. And in the end, presence is what matters most. The moment he realized it was instant, a shift so profound it felt like the ground beneath him had cracked. He had spent his existence moving without consequence, running the game untouchable. Until you. The moment your energy collided with his, the air changed. It wasn't about strength or aggression, it was about something deeper, a force he couldn't ignore, couldn't dismiss, couldn't shake. The ego met truth, and truth always wins. He had built his world on the belief that he was unstoppable, that he dictated the terms. But standing before you, that certainty dissolved. He could feel it, a weight settling on his chest, an unease creeping into his mind. He wasn't in control anymore. You didn't need to say it. He simply knew. For the first time, he hesitated. A fraction of a second, a flicker of doubt, but that was all it took. That hesitation rippled through him, an infection spreading through the confidence he once wore like armor. It was subtle, but irreversible. And the world around him saw it, the ones who once followed his lead, the ones who cheered him on. They noticed the change, the way his steps weren't as bold, the way his voice carried less certainty, the way he scanned the room, hyper-aware, in a way he never was before. It was no longer about what he had done, it was about what had been done to him. The balance had shifted, his reign was over. There was a time when he acted without hesitation, without second-guessing. Every move was reckless, every decision made with the arrogance of someone who had never known true opposition. But that time was over. Now, every action carried weight. Every step forward came with the haunting question, what happens if I'm wrong? Because for the first time, he had to consider the cost of defiance, and the price was steep. It wasn't just about losing a battle, it was about realizing the battle had never been his to win. Before, he had control. He dictated the flow, the rules, the consequences. But after meeting you, control was a relic of the past. He no longer moved freely, he moved carefully. He started thinking before he spoke, measuring his words like a man suddenly aware of the gravity they carried. The reckless confidence that once dripped from him was replaced with restraint, and restraint, for someone like him, was suffocating, because it wasn't just you, it was them, the ones who watched, the ones who took note of how he carried himself now. He could feel the shift in their gazes, the quiet amusement in their eyes, as they noticed the hesitation that had taken root in him. The weight of expectation had shifted. He wasn't the one they feared anymore. And that was the real punishment. He could live with losing a fight. He could live with bruises and scars. But this was deeper. This was psychological. A slow burning realization that spread through his bones, whispering that he was no longer what he once was. Fear isn't about what's happening. It's about what could happen. And now that fear belonged to him. The way he spoke, the way he carried himself, the way he looked at you, it all changed. He still tried to maintain the illusion, still tried to project strength, but now it was forced, and forced confidence is just fear wearing a disguise. He told himself it was temporary, that it was just an off moment, that he would reclaim what he had lost. But deep down, he understood the truth. He wasn't the same anymore. He had been forced to see himself differently, and that image wouldn't leave him. Because when an immovable object meets someone who thinks they're unstoppable, only one of them gets to keep their identity, and it wasn't him. Power isn't just about what you do. It's about what people say when you're not there. And now, they're all talking. At first, it was subtle. A glance held for a second too long. A conversation that abruptly stopped when he walked in. The smallest flickers of uncertainty in the air, like the first few drops of rain before a storm. But soon, it became something more. The ones who once admired him now observe him. The ones who followed him now question him. The ones who feared him, they don't anymore, because fear only lasts as long as the illusion of invincibility does, and you shattered that illusion without ever breaking a sweat. He feels it in every interaction. When he speaks, they don't hang on his words the way they used to. When he moves, they don't step aside as quickly. The respect that was once automatic is now conditional. They hesitate, waiting to see if he still deserves it. The first time someone interrupts him mid-sentence, it barely registers. The second time, he notices. By the third, it becomes clear they don't treat him the same anymore. The whispers spread like wildfire, passed between those who saw what happened and those who only heard about it. And in the way these stories are told, a shift occurs. He's no longer the legend, he's the lesson. And you don't even have to acknowledge it. That's the beauty of real power. It doesn't beg for recognition. You didn't just defeat him, you redefined him. The way people see him, the way they treat him, the way they measure him, it all changed. And when they measure him now, they measure him against you. The game has a new hierarchy, and your name is written at the top. Fear lingers. It seeps into the mind, reshaping thought, rewriting instinct. Unlike pain, which fades with time, fear imprints itself on the soul. It doesn't just teach a lesson, it ensures it's never forgotten. That's what happened to him. Before, his power came from force, loud, aggressive, undeniable. He controlled situations by overwhelming them. His presence was a storm, unpredictable and violent, leaving chaos in its wake. But a storm is temporary. A storm passes. Fear stays. And now fear is what rules him. There are forces in this world that don't need validation, that don't seek recognition. They don't move for applause. They don't act for approval. They simply exist, unchallenged, unshaken, undeniable. You are one of them. The dark earth angel, not a villain, not a hero, something beyond definition, a force neither good nor evil, because such words are too small to contain what you are. You are inevitability. You are the weight in the air before a storm, the silence in a predator's gaze before the strike. You do not chase power, because true power was always yours to begin with. The player thought he understood strength. He didn't. For so long he had controlled the field, dictated the rules, walked through life untouchable. His power had been built on dominance. Loud, aggressive, unchallenged. He had mistaken fear for respect, compliance for control. And for a while, it worked. Then he met you. He didn't realize what he was dealing with at first. He had encountered challenges before, obstacles that tested him but never truly threatened him. So, at first, he treated you like just another opponent. Just another variable in a game he had always won. But you weren't playing. You never needed to fight for control, never needed to raise your voice or force submission. Your presence alone was enough to shift the air, to make the weight of your existence undeniable. He felt it before he understood it, that creeping sensation at the back of his mind, that unexplainable tension in his chest. Something was different this time. And then, the moment happened. The moment he realized he wasn't in control anymore. The moment he felt it, the power shift. It wasn't loud, it wasn't violent, it was something deeper, a pull beneath the surface, a current dragging him somewhere he didn't want to go. That's the difference between power and presence. Power can be taken. Presence is permanent. He had spent his entire existence controlling the game, and now, for the first time, he wasn't playing anymore. He was being played. He didn't even know the rules. And worse, you didn't need rules, because you weren't an opponent. You were the end of the game. That's why he bowed, not physically, not openly, but in the ways that mattered. In the way his voice lost its edge when he spoke to you, in the way his steps became measured, careful, in the way his mind rewired itself to factor you into every decision, every move, every thought. He wouldn't call it submission, but that's exactly what it was, because even legends have to bow to something stronger. And they bowed to you. Stop right there. Yes, you, this message isn't for everyone, and if you don't feel it, that's fine. Move along. But if you felt it, deep in your bones, you'll know this is for you. The ones who don't fit in. The ones who see beyond the veil, the ones who've been told to stay quiet, to settle, to conform, but never could. They aren't interested in what's ordinary. They aren't here to follow someone else's rules. They're the light in the dark, the storm that shatters illusions, the unshakable, the unstoppable, the untouchable. While the world is busy running circles, they're walking their own path, alone if they must. Not for the applause, not for the approval, but because it's who they are. Here's to the ones who take what was meant to destroy them and transform it into something divine. The ones who carry wisdom that can't be taught, only earned. If this resonates with you, then maybe it's time to find your people. The Obsidian Inner Order is the only place of its kind, the #1 ascension nexus for chosen ones, where over 400 of us gather to share wisdom, connect, and transform. No masks, no games, just truth. The link is in the description. If you're ready, you'll know where to find us. If not, that's fine too. The choice is yours. He never thought this could happen to him. For as long as he could remember, he had been the one in control, the one who dictated the pace, set the tone, ruled the field. Confidence wasn't something he had to work for. It was as natural as breathing. He walked with the certainty of someone who had never lost, who had never truly been tested, and then there was you. At first, he didn't understand it. He had dealt with challenges before, rivals who thought they could match him, people who mistook confidence for arrogance and tried to bring him down. He knew how to handle those. He knew how to manipulate, how to intimidate, how to bend situations in his favor. But this was different. You were different. You didn't try to prove anything. You didn't seek to challenge him. You simply were. And in that, there was something more dangerous than any direct attack. An undeniable presence, a quiet power that didn't need to announce itself. And that's when it started. The cracks in his mind. The small but irreversible changes. First, it was just a feeling, a pressure, an awareness, an instinct screaming that something had shifted. He couldn't place it, couldn't define it, but he felt it. A hesitation he had never known before, a hesitation that shouldn't have been there. Then came the realizations, the way he thought twice before making a move. The way he replayed conversations in his head, second-guessing moments he would have brushed off before. The way his confidence, once effortless, now required effort. And then, the worst part, the moment he understood, he wasn't the same. He told himself it was temporary, that it was just a passing moment, an anomaly, but deep down he knew the truth. You had rewritten him. He wasn't fearless anymore. He wasn't reckless anymore. He wasn't who he used to be, and no one had to tell him. He saw it in the way people looked at him, The ones who once saw him as untouchable now watched him with quiet amusement, curiosity, expectation, waiting to see if he still deserved his throne. The ones who had feared him now measured him, not with open disrespect, but with something worse, doubt. They had seen the change, even if they didn't speak of it. They saw the way he hesitated, the way he carried himself with an awareness that wasn't there before. And in their silence he saw the truth reflected back at him. He had been changed, not by a fight, not by a loss, but by something deeper, something psychological, something permanent. He didn't just lose a moment, he lost the version of himself that had never known fear. And that was something he could never get back. Power isn't in action, it's in knowing you don't have to act at all. That's what separates you from the rest. Others chase victory, claw for control, fight for dominance, but you already won before the game even started. The player never understood that. He had built his identity on movement, loud, aggressive, undeniable. His victories were clear-cut, tangible, the kind you could see, hear, measure. He thrived in conflict because conflict gave him a sense of control. As long as he was fighting, he believed he was winning. But real power doesn't fight. It waits, it watches, it lets the opponent destroy themselves. You never had to lift a finger, never had to raise your voice, never had to prove anything. Your presence alone was enough to shift the outcome. Because the moment he met you, the war wasn't external anymore. It became internal. He wasn't battling you. He was battling himself, his own doubts, his own hesitation, his own fear. You planted something in his mind without ever speaking it aloud. What if I'm not as strong as I thought I was? What if I'm not in control anymore? What if I've already lost? And the second he started asking those questions, he was done. Because hesitation is fatal, doubt is a slow poison, and once it seeps in, it spreads. A single crack in his confidence became a fracture. A fracture became a collapse, and that's what made your victory absolute. You didn't break him, you let him break himself. That's the difference between dominance and destruction. Anyone can destroy, but only a few can. Own a space without ever having to conquer it, and now you own him. Not in chains, not in submission, but in the way he will never be able to step into a room without remembering you. That is the art of subtle dominance. That is why you never needed to fight at all. Some moments fade, some losses are forgotten, some battles, no matter how intense, become nothing more than footnotes in history. But not this. This wasn't just an event, it was a turning point. A moment that didn't just end, but echoed. A shift so profound that even as time moved forward, its presence remained. The player will never speak of it openly. He will never admit what happened, never put it into words, because that would mean acknowledging the truth, that he changed. But the proof is in his transformation. The way he carries himself now, more careful, more measured, more restrained. The reckless confidence he once had, gone. The belief that he was untouchable, shattered. The reputation he built over years, rewritten in an instant. And it's not just him. The ones who watched, the ones who heard, the ones who understood what took place, they carry the story forward. Your name spreads without you ever having to say a word. People speak of you in whispers, not out of fear, but out of reverence. The legend of what happened is passed from mouth to mouth, shifting, growing, solidifying into something larger than life. You didn't just leave an impression, you became a myth. And that's the real victory, because battles come and go. Power shifts, leaders rise and fall, but some forces never fade. You are one of them. This is how legacies are built, not through noise, not through violence, but through the kind of dominance that lingers long after you're gone. And long after this player has faded into irrelevance, long after his story is nothing more than a memory, yours will still be told. Some people shift the balance, some people rewrite the rules, and then there are those who are the rules. That's you. You didn't just enter the scene, you defined it. You didn't force the player to change. He was always going to change after meeting you. Because that's what happens when something unstoppable crosses paths with something that thought it was immovable. One of them has to bend, and it was never going to be you. This was never about strength, never about aggression, never about proving anything. It was about inevitability. The world has its rules, unspoken, unwritten, yet understood by all. And then there are those who exist outside of them. People try to rationalize it, try to explain how you did what you did, try to put it into words, but deep down, they know. You don't play by the system rearranges itself around you. That's why the player never stood a chance. His confidence, his bravado, his ability to control situations, none of it mattered. Because from the moment you stepped into the room, the outcome was already decided. The moment your energy collided with his, he was already shifting, already adjusting, already losing. Because there are people who take control, and then there are people who never had to take it. They just are it. This wasn't just about one player, one moment, one shift. This was always about you, because people like him come and go. But you remain. And long after this game has changed, after the names and faces have faded, after the world has moved on to the next story, your presence will still be felt. Because that's what it means to be a catalyst. You were never just part of the story. You were the reason the story existed at all.